What do Vaporwave, a movie starring Timothée Chalamet and the child of immigrants from the USSR, have in common? And why wasn't this talented musician even nominated for an Oscar? You are watching the Lester Beer YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and follow my pages on TikTok and Instagram. In this episode, I'll tell you why Daniel Lopatin, also known as Oneohtrix Point Never, is one of the most talented electronic artists of our time and a true legend of film soundtracks. Make sure to watch until the end. There are plenty of interesting facts in store for you. So, in the 2000s, Lopatin developed Vaporwave out of boredom while working an office job. But the story behind his nostalgic sound goes back decades. Daniel was born in 1982. He grew up in a family of Soviet Jewish immigrants who had been allowed to leave the country. His father, Alexei Lopatin, worked as an engineer in Leningrad. He was also passionate about music and played in a band called the Flying Dutchman. The band was formed in 1966 by a group of students, and they covered the songs of Tommy James and the Shandels, Manfred Mann and the Doors. The 1960s in the USSR were marked by a brief period of liberalization, a rise in intellectual life, and a growing interest in American and British music. In 1969, Alexei Lopatin decided to leave the band and devote himself to science. His record collection included a wide range of music, from jazz to Stevie Wonder. Daniel's love of music was also shaped by his mother, who was a music teacher and worked for Soviet radio. Lopatin was born in Massachusetts, where he attended Hampshire College before moving to Brooklyn. There he found himself at the center of electronic and experimental music scene. As a child, his mother tried to teach Daniel music, but her efforts didn't quite succeed. As Lopatin later recalled, he was too lazy and restless at the time to pursue classical training, which simply didn't interest him. In Soviet Russia, attending music school was a common part of childhood. It's no surprise then that Lopatin's parents tried to apply the same educational model to their son. As Lopatin later mentioned in an interview with the Red Bull Music Academy, he was a reckless kid who climbed trees and played video games. His mother only managed to teach him the basics of music. During his school years, he got into jazz and prog rock. Discovering the Mahavishnu Orchestra was a turning point for him. But everything changed when Lopatin discovered the sound of a Roland Juno 60 synthesizer his father kept in the basement. He would go down there and improvise for hours, imagining himself as a part of Mahavishnu Orchestra. The Roland Juno 60, produced between 1982 and 1984, became a cult instrument. It used digitally controlled oscillators, which gave musicians a new level of control over their sound. And it also played a key role in the development of Chicago house, helping shape the genre's signature sound. Lopatin used the Juno 60 extensively in his early work, including the retro-futuristic albums Betrayed in the Octagon and Russian Mind. You can also hear that vintage synth texture in his soundtrack for the Safdie brothers' film Good Time. According to legend, Lopatin came up with his stage name while coming down from anesthesia at the dentist's office. A Boston radio station, Magic 106.7, was playing, and his brain distorted the name into something entirely different. Whether you believe that story or not is up to you, but one thing is clear: Oneohtrix Point Never's music has a deeply hypnotic quality. Lopatin essentially started out as a vaporwave artist, even though the term didn't exist at the time. Here is how he later described the origins of the genre.
The long and short of it is, I have a desk job. I'm in Boston, hate my job. It's a publishing company and I'm doing nothing. So I downloaded some freeware on my computer. It was a Canadian audio editor program called Goldwave. And I started basically chopping and screwing soft rock. It was a track by Chris de Burgh called Lady in Red that I kind of isolated a little sliver of and turned it into almost like a mantra just on the lyric, Nobody Here. A little bit later, a generation later, a lot of young kids that were interested in making music refined that into more of a genre and called it Vaporwave. I can appreciate it, but for me, it was a very internal, very private practice of trying to take back things that I thought were kind of cheesy or corny, but had some sort of glimmer of beauty in them and try to make them better. I'm very, very happy that it became a kind of folk practice. I mean, I can't think of a better result, but I never intentionally tried to pioneer anything.
So yes, Vaporwave was born almost by accident, but it turned out to be a stroke of genius. In his early releases, Lopatin made heavy use of samples from older recordings, reworking tracks by stretching and slowing them down, creating that hazy, nostalgic sound that would later define the genre. His first major step into film scores came with Sofia Coppola's The Bling Ring. His music gave the story of teenagers robbing celebrities' homes a surreal, dreamlike atmosphere. But Lopatin's career in film really took off after he met the Safdie brothers and composed the score for their 2017 film Good Time, starring Robert Pattinson. This tense thriller about two criminal brothers would feel completely different without Lopatin's atmospheric soundtrack. Daniel Lopatin and the Safdie brothers first connected around 2014. At the time, the directors had just finished their film Heaven Knows What. The soundtrack featured work by Ariel Pink, along with compositions by Japanese electronic pioneer Isao Tomita. Tomita is best known for his groundbreaking synth work, including scores for films and anime like Kimba the White Lion, which later inspired Disney's The Lion King. When Lopatin learned that the Safdies had used Tomita's music, he reached out. He already knew they were interested in working with him and were open to commissioning original music for future projects. When they finally met, they instantly clicked. Lopatin was especially struck by the fact that the brothers were fans of his album Betrayed in the Octagon. Good Time went on to make a huge impact at Cannes, where Lopatin won the award for Best Soundtrack. The film channels the spirit of American cinema from the 70s and 80s, set against a dark, restless New York backdrop. Critics often compared it to early Scorsese and the films of Cassavetes. According to Lopatin, the scoring process itself was surprisingly relaxed. He worked closely with the Safdie brothers, staying in constant dialogue and shaping the sound of the film together with them. At times, Lopatin would even ask the directors to leave the studio so he could work alone. That's how tracks like Live in the Park and Flashback came together. Live in the Park plays during the scene where Connie Nikas drives down a deserted highway at night. The mood is strikingly cinematic. It brings to mind films like Drive, while also echoing the tense, minimalistic style of Carpenter's crime dramas. Flashback, on the other hand, underscores the storyline of Ray, a criminal whom Connie accidentally breaks out of the hospital, mistaking him for his brother. The track immediately recalls Tangerine Dream and the broader German electronic scene. A slow bass line carries a reflective, almost hypnotic keyboard melody. These influences weren't accidental. While working on the film, Lopatin and the Safdie brothers immersed themselves into 1970s electronic music, drawing inspiration from a wide range of artists, from John Abercrombie to Supermax. Russian composers were part of that mix as well. Eduard Artemiev, the legendary composer behind films like Solaris, played a key role in shaping Lopatin's understanding of film scoring. He has also cited Vivian Kubrick, who worked on Full Metal Jacket, along with Ennio Morricone, Jack Nietzsche, and even Don Cherry's film work as important influences. Oneohtrix Point Never often uses fragmented vocal textures in his soundtracks. Voices are echoed, distorted, stretched, and chopped into pieces, creating a hypnotic effect. Music and dialogue begin to merge into a single sonic space, like the soundtrack to an endless paranoid night filled with sirens, piercing guitar lines, and drum beats. Lopatin's compositions often feel like self-contained scenes, almost like mini-scripts. A great example is Connie, the track that underscores the film's climax and captures the full emotional intensity of the protagonist. He was also able to collaborate with Iggy Pop on the track The Pure and the Damned. The entire process happened remotely. Lopatin's team sent Iggy Pop a copy of the film along with the instrumental, and he recorded his vocals in Florida. The two artists didn't even meet in person.
The pure always act from love.
In 2018, Daniel Lopatin and Josh Safdie began working on the soundtrack for Uncut Gems. The film follows jeweler Howard Ratner, who acquires a rare black opal from Ethiopia and plans to sell it at auction for a huge profit. This time, Lopatin and the Safdie brothers took a deeply immersive approach. They wanted to get inside their characters' minds and pull the audience into the same psychological space. The film opens with a literal journey inside the gemstone. The camera moves through the opal, accompanied by the cosmic track The Ballad of Howie Blinn. Lopatin composed it on a Moog synthesizer, building it from just a few chords progression, arpeggios, and layered vocal textures. His goal was to create an opening that would immediately set the tone for everything that follows, something immersive, almost otherworldly. For this project, Lopatin chose to use his real name on the soundtrack. The process felt more personal this time. The score itself draws heavily on his and the Safdie brothers' shared love of prog rock and 1970s synth music. Josh Safdie even described it as having a strong New Age influence, which makes sense, especially considering Lopatin's 2019 album Age Of. Many of the tracks aren't very long, but in the film they merge into continuous musical flow. The score rarely lets up, mirroring the film's relentless tension and leaving the audience almost no room to breathe. At the same time, it paradoxically gives the viewer brief moments of relief, cutting through the chaos of constant dialogue. Some themes are closely tied to specific characters. For example, F.U. Howard plays during a heated argument between Howard and his lover. Here, Lopatin highlights how Julia exists in a completely different world. He reinforces that contrast by subtly working a motif inspired by Haydn, giving the scene an almost ironic emotional distance. At the time, Lopatin drew inspiration from a wide range of sources, from Giorgio Moroder to Tsutomu Hashi, the composer behind the cult anime Akira. In the track Windows, he even quotes a motif from the iconic Canada theme. Despite all these influences, the Uncut Gems score stands as a fully self-contained work, woven tightly into the fabric of the film and inseparable from the story of this desperate, unlucky jeweler. Lopatin continued this trajectory with later projects, including the soundtrack for Marty Supreme, which also received strong critical attention. And yet surprisingly, his work has never been nominated for an Academy Award. Why? Despite the recognition and influence of his soundtracks, none of Lopatin's scores have ever been selected by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Even as recently as 2026, when he was up against major contenders like Sinners, Hamnet, and One Battle After Another, he still didn't receive a nomination. Lopatin's music was clearly on par with these composers, surpassing them in some cases. In fact, Daniel Lopatin was even shortlisted for the 2026 Academy Awards, but ultimately didn't make the final list of nominees. Many would call this a major oversight, and I'm one of them. His work on Uncut Gems and other films proves that he is not just an electronic innovator, but a true master of cinematic storytelling through music. Although Marty Supreme is set in 1950s America, Lopatin chose to score it in an 80s style. He drew inspiration from composers like Vangelis and Giorgio Moroder, and there are also parallels with Japanese composer Junko Miyagi, known for reworking and adapting music from Miyazaki's anime. This kind of contrast between eras is a well-established cinematic device. You can think of films like Marie Antoinette, where 19th century stories paired with 2000s indie rock. Lopatin explained his approach like this: I see Marty Mauser as a hot knife slicing through the old world, and he is the new world. Marty is the firelight and the world is the orchestra and the choir. In other words, Lopatin wanted to show that his protagonist already belongs to the future. We may not see it yet, but we can hear it. It is a striking idea. When creating this soundtrack, Lopatin also drew inspiration from vibraphones and other mallet-based instruments. To achieve that dynamic, energetic sound, he used early 80s digital synthesizers. You can hear echoes of bands like Tears for Fears and Depeche Mode, which served as a kind of sonic reference point. There is even a subtle layer of classical, almost baroque influence running through the soundtrack, as if it is being filtered through the lens of 80s pop culture. This neoclassical touch was something Josh Safdie specifically wanted to bring into the film. I wanted to make music that had a kind of an ability to be a place that you remember, that you go back to, Lopatin explained. Alongside synthesizers, he made extensive use of live instruments, saxophone, flutes, zither, percussion, and even a children's choir during recording sessions at a Manhattan studio. The process was highly collaborative. Lopatin worked closely with Josh Safdie, helped guide the oral direction and bring the pieces together. As Lopatin himself put it, Safdie almost acted like a conductor. He was also able to watch scenes from the film before its release, which helped him shape the music more precisely. The result is something almost cinematic on its own. Even without the visuals, the soundtrack feels like it's telling a story. Speaking about his connection to the main character, Lopatin said, "His buoyancy, his mercurial nature, his excitable nature, his speed, and the sound of the game helped me find a parallel in quick strike, percussive, mallet-based sounds that were also prevalent in new wave music, because that was an era where the first digital synthesizers coming out were sampling all of those organic instruments." This deeply personal approach extended to the other characters as well. For example, to represent Milton, Lopatin leaned into darker, more gothic textures, almost vampire-like in tone. For a film as maximalist and action-packed as Marty Supreme, Lopatin deliberately went in the opposite direction, creating a more minimalistic score that wouldn't overwhelm the story or disrupt the space. That's really what defines Lopatin as a composer. He always finds his own approach, his own sound, his own way into a film. And that's exactly what makes him one of the most distinctive voices in modern film music. Does he deserve an Oscar? Absolutely. But at the same time, words aren't everything. Lopatin already has something more important: recognition, influence, and a sound that's impossible to mistake for anyone else. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. What's your favorite Daniel Lopatin soundtrack? And do you think he deserves an Oscar? Don't forget to follow me on TikTok and Instagram, and I'll see you in the next video.